Have you ever looked at your plate and thought, I'm doing everything right? So why do my lab numbers keep getting worse? If you're eating more vegetables, cutting back on meat, choosing what doctors call healthy foods, then let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if some of those very foods are quietly damaging your kidneys right now, without pain, without warning, without you ever knowing? My name is Dr. Richard Hale, and I need you to hear this clearly. Kidney damage doesn't always come from sugar, salt, or junk food. In fact, in people over 55, some of the fastest kidney decline I see comes from foods that look innocent green, fresh plant-based foods that most Americans are told to eat more of. And the danger isn't dramatic. It's silent. No sharp pain, no early symptoms. Just slow damage building day after day until one blood test finally changes everything. Your kidneys are working every second of your life, filtering toxins, balancing minerals, protecting your heart and brain. But as we age, that filter weakens, and certain vegetables, because of oxalates, potassium, overload, or naturally occurring toxins, can push already tired kidneys past their limit. This is how people who believe they're eating clean end up shocked by rising creatinine, kidney stones, or even discussions about dialysis. And here's what makes this urgent. Most doctors don't warn you. Nutrition labels don't explain it. And online advice often repeats the same dangerous oversimplification. Vegetables are always safe. They're not. Not all of them. Not in unlimited amounts. Not for aging kidneys. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 10 common vegetables that may be silently harming your kidneys, and more importantly, how to protect yourself without giving up healthy eating. Stay with me, because the one that surprises people the most is usually the one they eat every single day. Let's start with a vegetable almost everyone trusts without question: spinach. For many people, spinach feels like the definition of doing the right thing. It's green, it's fresh, it's in smoothies, salads, and juices that promise detox and longevity. I once spoke with a retired teacher in her early 60s who told me she ate spinach every single day, sometimes twice a day, because she wanted to protect her heart and stay young. She was shocked when her doctor later found early kidney stones, even though she had never touched junk food. Here's what most people aren't told. Spinach is extremely high in oxalates, natural compounds that bind to calcium in your digestive system. One serving of spinach can contain over 700 milligrams of oxalates, an amount high enough to overwhelm aging kidneys. When oxalates bind with calcium, they form hard crystals that travel to the kidneys, where they can slowly accumulate and turn into stones. This process doesn't happen overnight, and that's what makes it dangerous. There's often no pain at first, no warning sign, just silent buildup. A study published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that people who ate spinach alone absorbed significantly more oxalates than those who consumed it alongside calcium-rich foods. Hydration helps, yes, but it doesn't erase the risk when intake is frequent and unbalanced. Spinach isn't the enemy, but quantity, preparation, and context matter more than people realize. And here's the uncomfortable part. Spinach is only the beginning, because the next vegetable hides its danger even better, and far more people are eating it without realizing the cost. After spinach, many people turn to another vegetable they believe is even more powerful: beets. Bright red, packed with antioxidants, often praised for circulation and blood pressure, beets have become a favorite in juices, salads, and heart-healthy diets. I remember a man in his late 60s who started drinking beet juice every morning because he heard it would improve blood flow and energy. Within a year, he wasn't feeling better. He was dealing with recurring kidney stones and constant fatigue, with no idea the two could be connected. The hidden issue with beets is their extremely high oxalate content. One serving of beets can contain up to 750 milligrams of oxalates, placing them among the highest of all vegetables. Inside the body, oxalates bind with calcium and form crystals that concentrate in the kidneys. Over time, this leads to calcium oxalate stone formation, especially in people whose kidneys are already under strain from age, dehydration, or metabolic stress. What makes beets even more problematic is how they're often consumed. A study conducted in Iran found that individuals with higher dietary insulin load, common in people drinking beet juice or consuming beets frequently, had a 214% higher risk of kidney stone formation. Insulin spikes increase oxalate absorption, pushing more of these compounds directly into the kidneys. There are ways to reduce the risk. Light boiling can lower oxalate levels, And pairing beets with calcium-rich foods helps bind oxalates before they reach the kidneys. But moderation is essential, especially with juices. And this is where things become more concerning, because the next vegetable doesn't just affect the kidneys, it can quietly interfere with your heart rhythm as well. After hearing about oxalates, many people assume the danger stops there. But kidney stress doesn't always come from stones. Sometimes it comes from something far quieter and far more dangerous to the heart. That brings us to tomatoes. Fresh, juicy, cooked into sauces, blended into soups, tomatoes are everywhere in the American diet. I once spoke with a woman in her early 70s who had switched almost all her meals to tomato-based dishes because she believed they were light, anti-inflammatory, and good for longevity. Her surprise came when routine blood work showed dangerously high potassium levels. Here's what most people don't realize. Tomatoes are high in potassium, a mineral the kidneys are responsible for removing from the bloodstream. 1 cup of fresh tomatoes contains around 425 milligrams of potassium, and processed tomato products like sauces, pastes, and canned soups often contain even more. In healthy kidneys, excess potassium is filtered out efficiently. But as kidney function declines with age or chronic disease, that safety system weakens. When potassium builds up in the blood, it can lead to hyperkalemia, a condition that interferes with muscle function and, more critically, heart rhythm. Irregular heartbeat weakness, and in severe cases, sudden cardiac events can occur without much warning. Reviews of kidney nutrition consistently caution that high potassium foods, including tomatoes, require careful monitoring in people with chronic kidney disease. Tomatoes are not inherently bad, but portion size, frequency, and preparation matter more than most people are told. Diluting sauces, limiting servings, and balancing meals can reduce risk, but ignoring potassium adds silent pressure to aging kidneys. And this is only part of the story, because the next vegetable looks harmless, comforting, even nostalgic, yet it carries an even heavier potassium load than tomatoes ever could. After tomatoes, many people assume they've already identified the biggest potassium risk. But there's a vegetable that feels even safer, more familiar, almost comforting: potatoes. Baked, boiled, mashed, or roasted potatoes are often seen as gentle, filling, and easy on the stomach. I once spoke with a grandfather in his late 60s who ate potatoes nearly every day because they reminded him of home-cooked meals and didn't upset his digestion. What he didn't realize was that his favorite comfort food was quietly pushing his potassium levels higher with every serving. Here's the part that rarely gets explained. A single medium potato contains around 600 milligrams of potassium, an amount that already exceeds what many people with kidney disease should consume in an entire meal. Potassium is essential for nerve signaling and muscle contraction, but when kidney function declines, the body loses its ability to remove excess potassium efficiently. This leads to hyperkalemia, a condition that can disrupt muscle control and more dangerously interfere with the heart's electrical rhythm. What makes potatoes especially tricky is preparation. Research published in the Journal of Food Science found that boiling diced potatoes can reduce potassium by about 50%, while boiling shredded potatoes can reduce it by up to 75%. In contrast, soaking potatoes without cooking offers little benefit. This means how you cook potatoes matters just as much as how often you eat them. Potatoes aren't forbidden, but frequent unmodified servings can quietly overload aging kidneys. Smart preparation can reduce risk, but only if you know the danger exists in the first place. And just when people think they understand potassium risk, the next vegetable raises the stakes even higher because it combines potassium with another kidney stressor most people never see coming. Just when people feel they've learned how to manage potatoes safely, many switch to what they believe is the healthier, upgrade sweet potatoes. They're often praised as anti-inflammatory, rich in nutrients, and better for blood sugar, which is why so many older adults replace regular potatoes with them. I remember speaking with a woman in her early 70s who proudly told me she ate sweet potatoes almost daily, convinced she was protecting both her heart and her kidneys. What she didn't realize was that her well-intentioned choice was quietly working against her. Sweet potatoes carry a double burden for aging kidneys. First, they are very high in potassium. A single serving can contain up to 700 milligrams of potassium, an amount that quickly overwhelms kidneys that are already losing filtering efficiency. As potassium accumulates in the bloodstream, it raises the risk of hyperkalemia, a condition that can disrupt muscle control and trigger dangerous heart rhythm disturbances without obvious warning signs. But potassium isn't the only issue. Sweet potatoes also contain significant amounts of oxalates, compounds that bind with calcium and increase the risk of kidney stone formation. 1 cup of cooked sweet potatoes contains around 28 milligrams of oxalates, enough to contribute to stone buildup in people who are susceptible or dehydrated. Medical guidance, including recommendations highlighted by WebMD, consistently advises individuals prone to kidney stones to limit high oxalate foods like sweet potatoes. This doesn't mean sweet potatoes are forbidden, but frequent servings, large portions, or daily habits can quietly strain the kidneys. Moderation, careful portion control, and thoughtful preparation make all the difference. And if you think this combination of potassium and oxalates is concerning, wait until you hear about the next food, because it's one many people eat specifically for heart health without realizing what it may be doing to their kidneys. After hearing about sweet potatoes, many people instinctively reach for what they believe is the safest heart-healthy option: avocados. Creamy, satisfying, full of good fats, avocados are often recommended for cholesterol, blood sugar balance, and cardiovascular health. I once spoke with a man in his early 70s who added avocado to nearly every meal after his doctor warned him about heart disease. He felt confident he was doing something protective. What he didn't expect was a steady rise in his potassium levels, discovered only through routine blood work. Here's what rarely gets emphasized. Avocados are extremely high in potassium. A single average-sized avocado contains around 680 to 700 milligrams of potassium, placing it among the highest potassium plant foods commonly eaten. In people with healthy kidneys, that potassium is filtered out. But in aging kidneys, especially those affected by chronic kidney disease, the filtration system weakens, allowing potassium to build up silently in the bloodstream. This buildup can lead to hyperkalemia, which interferes with nerve signaling and the heart's electrical rhythm. Some people feel mild symptoms like weakness or tingling. Others feel nothing at all until a sudden cardiac irregularity appears. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Nutrition found that while avocado consumption was associated with lower urinary albumin, individual responses varied widely, especially in people with more advanced kidney impairment. In other words, benefits for some do not guarantee safety for all. Avocados are not inherently harmful, but frequent portions, large servings, and daily habits can quietly tip the balance for vulnerable kidneys. Careful monitoring and moderation are essential. And just when most people think potassium is the only concern left, the next food introduces a different kind of danger. One that doesn't come from minerals at all, but from something far harder to detect. Up to this point, everything we've talked about involves minerals like potassium or compounds like oxalates. But now the danger changes completely, because this next food can harm the kidneys, not through overload, but through direct toxicity. That food is mushrooms. Most people see mushrooms as light, harmless, even medicinal. I once treated a case involving a man in his late 60s who loved foraging for wild mushrooms, something he had done safely for decades. He felt fine for days after a meal, then weeks later, his kidneys began to fail rapidly without any obvious explanation. The cause was a toxin called arelanine found in certain wild mushroom species. Arelanine is particularly dangerous because it doesn't act immediately. After ingestion, it undergoes metabolic activation, producing reactive oxygen species that attack the kidney's proximal tubules. Symptoms can take 2 to 21 days to appear, starting with vague fatigue or nausea, long after most people would suspect food poisoning. By the time kidney damage becomes clear, it is often severe and irreversible. A study published in the American Journal of Kidney Diseases documented multiple cases where patients developed end-stage renal failure after consuming toxic mushrooms, even with medical treatment. Many required lifelong dialysis or kidney transplantation. And while cultivated mushrooms like button or shiitake are generally safe in moderation, mushrooms also contain purines which break down into uric acid. Excess intake can raise uric acid levels, increasing the risk of gout and uric acid kidney stones. Mushrooms aren't dangerous by default, but misidentification, overconsumption, or false confidence can be devastating. Awareness is the only real protection. And just when you think toxicity is the worst threat, the next vegetable quietly blends risk with nutrition in a way that confuses almost everyone who eats it regularly. After hearing about toxins and hidden dangers, many people expect the next food to be clearly bad. But this one is confusing precisely because it sits in the gray zone. Brussels sprouts. Small green, often praised for fiber, vitamins, and cancer-fighting compounds. Brussels sprouts are commonly recommended as a smart vegetable choice, especially for older adults trying to eat clean. I once spoke with a woman in her late 60s who added Brussels sprouts to dinner almost every night, believing they were helping her immune system and digestion. What she didn't realize was that her kidneys were quietly struggling to keep up. Here's why Brussels sprouts deserve caution. They contain both oxalates and potassium, not extreme amounts individually, but enough to matter when eaten frequently by someone with reduced kidney function. Half a cup of Brussels sprouts contains around 17 milligrams of oxalates, which may seem mild, but repeated exposure can contribute to crystal formation in susceptible individuals. At the same time, 1 cup provides roughly 340 milligrams of potassium, adding to the daily potassium load the kidneys must clear. For healthy kidneys, this balance is manageable, but for aging kidneys or early chronic kidney disease, repeated intake can slowly tip the scale. Excess potassium raises the risk of hyperkalemia, while oxalates add pressure to the kidney's filtering system. Nutrition guidelines consistently emphasize that these vegetables are beneficial, but only when portion size and frequency are personalized. Brussels sprouts are not a problem food by default. They are a context food. How often you eat them, how much, and what else is on your plate determines whether they help or harm, but moderation alone won't protect you from the next vegetable, because the one coming up is dangerous even in small amounts when eaten the wrong way. This next vegetable surprises almost everyone because it looks harmless, even old-fashioned rhubarb. Tart, colorful, often used in pies or stewed dishes, rhubarb feels like something your grandparents ate without worry. I once spoke with a man in his early 70s who enjoyed rhubarb regularly because it reminded him of childhood desserts and felt lighter than processed sweets. What no one warned him about was how aggressively rhubarb can affect the kidneys when eaten in larger amounts. Rhubarb is extremely high in oxalates, among the highest of all plant foods. When oxalates enter the body, they bind with calcium and form crystals that are difficult for the kidneys to eliminate. If absorption is high or kidney function is already reduced, these crystals can accumulate directly inside the renal tubules. Over time, this leads to inflammation, blockage, and structural damage that the kidneys struggle to repair. A case study published in BMC Nephrology documented a patient with previously normal kidney function who developed acute kidney injury after consuming large amounts of rhubarb. Doctors found extensive calcium oxalate crystal deposits in the kidneys, a condition known as secondary oxalate nephropathy. Once this process begins, recovery can be slow or incomplete, especially in older adults. Hydration and dietary calcium can reduce oxalate absorption, but with rhubarb, the margin for error is narrow. Even moderate portions can pose a risk for people with a history of kidney stones or reduced kidney function. This isn't a food that allows casual habits. And if you think rhubarb is an outlier, the final vegetable ties everything together because it combines oxalates, potassium, and a common healthy habit that pushes kidneys past their breaking point. And this brings us to the last vegetable, the one that quietly connects everything you've heard so far. Dark leafy greens, spinach, beet greens, Swiss chard, kale, foods that are almost universally labeled as superfoods. I once spoke with an 81-year-old man who replaced nearly all of his meals with green juices because he wanted to detox and stay young. He believed more greens meant more health. Within months, his kidney function declined sharply, and doctors later traced the damage back to something he never suspected. Dark leafy greens place two major stresses on aging kidneys at the same time. First, many of them are high in oxalates, which bind with calcium and form crystals that can clog the kidney's filtering system. When oxalate intake becomes excessive, especially through juices, urine becomes supersaturated, dramatically increasing the risk of kidney stones and direct tubular injury. Second, these greens are also very high in potassium. 1 cup of cooked spinach contains over 800 milligrams of potassium, nearly half of what many chronic kidney disease patients should consume in an entire day. The National Kidney Foundation repeatedly cautions that while leafy greens are nutrient-dense, their potassium and oxalate content requires careful control in people with reduced kidney function. Juicing concentrates these compounds, removing the natural fiber that slows absorption and overwhelms the kidneys all at once. Dark leafy greens aren't dangerous because they're unhealthy. They're dangerous when eaten without limits, without balance, and without understanding how aging kidneys respond. And now comes the most important question of all, because knowing which foods strain your kidneys is only half the story. What truly matters is what you do next, and that's exactly what we need to talk about. If you've stayed with me until this moment, I want you to know something important. None of this is meant to scare you, and none of this means you failed your body. In fact, the opposite is true. The very fact that you're watching, listening, and learning tells me you care deeply about your health, and that already puts you ahead of most people. Your kidneys are resilient, but they are also honest. They respond to what you give them day after day. The goal is not to fear food or eliminate everything you enjoy. The goal is awareness. Eating smarter, adjusting portions, choosing better preparation methods, and understanding your own limits can make a real difference, especially as we get older. Small changes made consistently protect kidney function far more than extreme diets ever will. If this video helped you see food differently, even just a little, I encourage you to save this video. You may want to come back to it or share it with someone you care about who's trying to do the right thing for their health, but doesn't have all the information yet. Knowledge is most powerful when it's shared. And if you want to continue learning how to care for your kidneys in a way that's realistic, science-based, and designed for real life, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. I regularly share clear, up-to-date medical insights to help you protect kidney function, understand lab results, and avoid the hidden mistakes that so many people make without realizing it. Most of all, remember this: it's never too late to support your kidneys. The body has an incredible ability to stabilize and heal when it's given the right conditions. With the right knowledge, the right habits, and the right support, you can move forward with confidence instead of fear. Thank you for trusting me with your time today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.